By the end of the 20th century and the dawn of the 21st, the United States had reached a new stage in its military history. The Cold War was over, and the country became the hegemonic military superpower in the world and entered the era of precision warfare, with smart weapons and state-of-the-art electronics. Today's video continues our series on wars waged by the United States. Also known as Operation Desert Storm, the Gulf War was a military conflagration that took place in 1990, representing a turning point in Middle Eastern politics and in U.S. military history. It was triggered by Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in August 1990, led by Iraqi President Saddam Hussein. He justified the invasion by alleging historical disputes over the territory and accusing Kuwait of jeopardizing the Iraqi economy by surpassing the OPEC oil production quotas. Iraq's aggressive action was instantly condemned by the international community, and the UN imposed economic sanctions on the country. Under President George Bush, the United States took a leading role in forming an international coalition to counter the invasion. It included NATO countries, Arab nations, and other nations, totaling 34 countries. The objective was clear: to oust Iraqi forces from Kuwait and reinstate the country's sovereignty. Following months of preparation and an ultimatum for Iraqi withdrawal, the war started in January 1991 with an extensive air campaign aiming at Iraq's military and communications infrastructure. This was followed by a swift ground offensive in February, lasting just 100 hours before Iraqi forces were routed and Kuwait liberated. One remarkable aspect of the Gulf War was the widespread use of advanced military technology by the United States and its allies. This included precision weapons, stealth aircraft, electronic warfare, and satellite systems. It was also notable for its media coverage, as one of the first conflicts to be broadcast almost instantaneously to a global audience on television. The Gulf War ended in February 1991 when Kuwait was liberated. The conflict had a major impact on the region and the world. It established the United States as the hegemonic military power at the end of the Cold War and shifted the Middle East's geopolitical dynamics. The war in Afghanistan stemmed from the 9/11 attacks carried out by the terrorist organization Al-Qaeda, headed by Osama bin Laden, which was based in Afghanistan under Taliban rule. The U.S., under the presidency of George W. Bush, launched Operation Enduring Freedom to respond to the attacks. It aimed to dismantle Al-Qaeda and dislodge the Taliban from power for having sheltered and supported Al-Qaeda. The operation began in October 2001 with an air bombing campaign followed by a ground invasion, which rapidly toppled the Taliban regime. But the war stretched far beyond its initial mission. Once the Taliban fell, the United States and its NATO allies engaged in a long and cumbersome counterinsurgency and reconstruction effort. While the Taliban was initially defeated, they continued to exist as an insurgency, regularly launching attacks against coalition forces and the Western-backed Afghan government. Challenges faced by the U.S. and its allies included Afghanistan's rugged geography, the country's intricate tribal and political dynamics, and the presence of other militant groups, such as the Haqqani and the Islamic State. The United States attempted multiple pacification strategies and efforts over the years, training and supporting the Afghan army and police, and several reconstruction and development initiatives. The cost of the war was massive, both in terms of lives lost and financial resources. It also had a profound impact on Afghan society, resulting in significant civilian losses and population displacement. The U.S. involvement in the war gradually altered over the years, steadily reducing troops and boosting the role of the Afghan security forces. Under Donald Trump's presidency, the United States signed an agreement with the Taliban in 2020, paving the way for the withdrawal of American troops. This was finalized under President Joe Biden in August 2021, officially ending the U.S. military presence in Afghanistan. The embarrassing U.S. withdrawal and the ensuing swift takeover by the Taliban in 2021 was a major blow to the U.S. government. Footage of Afghans desperately clinging to U.S. aircraft in a last-ditch attempt to escape typifies the humanitarian crisis Afghanistan has been left in after 20 years of intervention and war. Starting in 2003, the Iraq War was unleashed by a U.S.-led coalition invasion of Iraq under the presidency of George W. Bush, with Britain as its key ally. This was justified by bogus, fabricated allegations and forged intelligence documents to mislead public opinion that Iraq under Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and ties to terrorist groups. After a period of heavy diplomacy and debate in the United Nations, the invasion began in March 2003, when the U.S. and its allies failed to secure a resolution explicitly authorizing the use of force. The war's initial phase started with a heavy air attack, known as shock and awe, followed by a ground invasion. Coalition forces quickly pushed forward, facing varying resistance. The major fights during this phase included the Battle of Nasiriyah and the Battle of Basra. Baghdad's fall in April effectively ended Saddam Hussein's regime. But the Americans failed in locating the weapons of mass destruction that had been quoted as the main rationale for the war. The absence of these weapons, which never existed, led to substantial questions about the validity of the intelligence reports used to launch the war and whether the invasion was justified. After Saddam's overthrow, Iraq was engulfed in chaos. The coalition's move to disband the Iraqi army and the banning of Saddam's Ba'ath Party members from holding public office all contributed to a power vacuum. It led to a growing insurgency against the coalition forces and the new Western-backed Iraqi government. This conflict evolved into a violent sectarian war, escalating tensions between Iraq's Shiite, Sunni, and Kurdish groups. The United States and its allies came under international criticism for their actions and for claims of human rights violations, including the mistreatment of prisoners at the Abu Ghraib prison. Internally, the war became increasingly unpopular as casualties rose and the mission's objectives seemed less clear. It also had far-reaching implications in the region. It contributed to Iran's entrenchment and created the groundwork for the Islamic State to emerge in Iraq and Syria. The United States started withdrawing its troops from Iraq in 2010 and completed the final withdrawal in 2011. But the U.S. military returned to Iraq in 2014 as part of an international coalition to counter ISIS. The Iraq War is often regarded as one of the most controversial U.S. military ventures, mounting debates about its justification, human and financial costs, and the long-term consequences for both Iraq and international politics. This wraps up our list of wars faced by the United States during its history. It's up to you now. What do you think will be the next war that the Americans will be engaged in? And will they again come out on top?